Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Five Door Media Podcast, the number one place on the internet where cleaning company business owners can learn, grow, and connect. We're continuing on with season 5 of the podcast, talking about where we're zooming in on the money side of owning a cleaning business: profits, cash flow, pricing, owner pay, everything you need to know about building a sustainable, scalable company that actually pays you. Our guest today is Justin Boyd, founder of Cashflow Copilot, a bookkeeping and outsourced CFO firm that works with home service businesses, including cleaning companies, to take control of their numbers, optimize their cash flow, and make confident data backed decisions. Justin isn't just a finance guy. He's a translator between the spreadsheets and the strategy. With over 20 years of experience in finance and accounting, he's seen where business owners get stuck, what separates profitable companies from the paycheck to paycheck grind, and how to build financial systems that give owners clarity, confidence, and real freedom. In this episode, we'll be diving into the habits and systems that drive profitability, how to actually use your numbers to make decisions, and how cleaning business owners can build companies that are financially strong, even if they hate the numbers. Justin, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah. This season's been really fun so far. I mean, we've had cleaning business owners on the show that have built, well, like multiple seven-figure cleaning businesses. We've had some smaller cleaning business owners on the show, but now we've got the finance guy. We've got like the guy, this is what you do for not just cleaning businesses, but home service companies across the country. So I'm excited to see your insight and impact that you're seeing inside of this, in this world that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking through it and seeing where it takes us.
Awesome. So let's get into it. I want to talk about where you see cleaning business owners getting stuck. You've worked with cleaning businesses and home service businesses across the board, probably like every stage, right? You've probably worked with startups, you've worked with people that have been around for a while and they're established. What are some of the most common financial blind spots that you see in the cleaning industry?
Yeah, I would say yeah, we do work with startups all the way up through, companies that are doing 10 plus million in revenue, and they all struggle with a lot of the same things. Some of the, more mature, larger businesses have tackled some of those things and are more refining them. But all across the board, especially, companies that are newer, are the number one thing is just not knowing their numbers and making decisions based on emotion and based on how much money is in the bank account and a gut feel as opposed to actual data and financial data. So that's one of the biggest things that we see, and it's challenging. But I understand how that happens because the business owners will start a company because they're passionate about something. They want financial freedom, and they found a good business model to be in, or an industry to be in that maybe doesn't require a lot of overhead to get started. They're really good at what they do and refining what they do, and they're building a team, building customers, doing marketing, doing sales, all this stuff. But they don't necessarily have a financial background to understand, well, how do I actually track all this stuff, and how do I use that data to then make decisions? They're running so fast that it's survival mode, and if they're not careful, that that mentality can lead them into years and years of operating like that and just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, so to speak. So that's definitely, I would say, the number one thing. I would say the second thing is not managing cash properly. So
Mm.
it's in our company name, and I also like aviation. That's kind of how we came up with the name Cashflow
Sure.
Copilot.
Yeah.
But it is, we see ourselves as the co-pilot of the business owners, the pilot. But cash flow is first and foremost. It's the king. It's the king for a reason, right? They say cash is king.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how profitable you are. We've seen a lot of profitable companies that don't know how to manage their cash, because cash is really a dance of timing. And
Mm.
if you don't have cash now and in the future, you can't pay payroll, you can't buy supplies, you can't do the things that are actually sustaining your company, even if you're profitable on your P&L. So just the understanding of the dance of cash flow, the timing of cash flow, how to plan for it, how to forecast it, and where all the dollars are going. They might really understand how to look through a P&L, because that's, I would say, the number one financial statement that most business owners focus on. But
Mm.
once it gets to the balance sheet, and especially the cash flow statement, they don't understand how that translates to what ends up in the bank account. And so that's a big, I want to say oversight, but a big, landmine we help people avoid, that step into that a lot.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and I've heard that quite a bit on this season so far is finances a lot of times they get run off of vibes,
Yeah.
just like how are we feeling? We feel like we can afford this?
Yep.
Do we? I don't know. We could probably do that. We just got that big account, right? So you're right. Like it's more off of rainbows and butterflies than it is like actual numbers of looking at things.
Yep.
But another thing we've talked a lot about this season is just people struggle to get a handle on their numbers, and there is a long laundry list of probably that reasons why people struggle with that. We've talked about like mindset is a big thing of it. I do know in the cleaning industry specifically, a lot of times these business owners that are now running six-figure companies, seven-figure companies, that in no way was it their intent when they first picked up a mop and a bucket,
Exactly.
right? And like they just wanted some extra cash. They were cleaning some homes on the side. And the next thing they know, they have staff. And next thing they know, they have to like worry about taxes and all these things. Like this wasn't their plan. They kind of like fell into their lap. Great problem to have. But there's a mindset of like, oh, I'm not a business owner like that. I don't know the finances of my company. I can't figure any of that kind of thing out.
Yeah.
But why do you think so many business owners struggle to get a handle on their numbers, even in situations where revenue is growing? And on those vibes, it looks like the business is doing well, but we still struggle to get a handle on what the spreadsheets are showing us.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think, and I kind of alluded to that, and you just alluded to that as well, where they might grow faster than they were expecting. That brings with it so many uh, issues, problems, challenges in terms of, staffing, compliance, payroll, all that stuff, right? And just managing everything. And it's so number one, I think it can be really overwhelming. Where it's like, hey, I know there's a lot of stuff I should be doing, but it's that I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next month, or I'll do it once I get to this next point where I hired, a manager, or I got the staffing issues, taken care of, or, I've gotten these
Yeah.
new customers on board, and I'll deal with it at that point. So I think part of it is overwhelming, and it's instead of breaking it down or having someone help you break it down and figure out what's priority first, second, third, it's more like, I'll put that on the back burner. I've survived this far. I can go another month. I can go another 2 months. Another thing is, especially what I see is people feel embarrassed about it. And so they don't want to reach out for help, and they don't know how to do it themselves. So they kind of say, well, I don't want to show other people that I'm messy, or ask for help in this situation.
Mm,
Or, I'll go learn it. I'll try to figure it out. They're not doing the who, not how that we all teach.
sure.
Um, and just thinking that they need to be the expert, I guess, and so waiting till there's a point where they feel like they can do that. But I feel like it just gets a lot of times it's just the inertia, and it's just those habits that are formed where it feels very uncomfortable and painful to have to open the box of as soon as I go into this financial thing, there's going to be so many things I have to do. I don't have the time. I don't have the knowledge. I don't know where to start, and it just becomes overwhelming. And so, and they can also feel again embarrassed about talking to other people about it, because people are going to think, oh, you should have done this from the beginning, right? You're not doing these
Mhm.
things, and they're basic things, and you should have been doing these. And they might think that their financial knowledge and the stuff they've done so far needs to be up to par based on what the world sees from their company, as far as you're doing this much revenue and you have this many employees, you're this big, but you don't have your basic financial things in order. That gap can be really, and it's ever widening every day, and that can be really mentally challenging, if they don't know where to start.
Well, speaking about just revenue and profit, that
Yeah.
leads me in perfectly right into the next thing I want to talk about. A lot of owners, whether they're in networking groups or anything like that, we get really excited about sales growth.
Hmm.
We get really excited about revenue, but at the same time, no matter sometimes how much that revenue grows, how much those sales grow, we're still broke,
Yep.
right? So, how do you help companies shift from having a mindset of chasing revenue to prioritizing profitability?
Yeah.
Because, there's that old phrase, right? Revenue is for vanity, profits for sanity. How do you help and coach people through that mindset, like that mindset shift?
Yep. Yeah, so a big part of it is, in the beginning stages, again, back to the problem of not knowing your numbers, we really isolate and identify how much we should be spending in different areas, right? We have, especially in a service industry like this, your direct labor is your largest expense, and you have materials. What should our gross profit be? And then how much should we be spending on, overhead, your fixed expenses, administrative help, owner pay, um, your discretionary expenses, things like that, and what based on, the size of our company, what our net profit should be. And so really identifying and putting numbers around that, creating a budget around that is really a telling point or something we want to establish because again, back to one of the issues of embarrassment or lack of accountability. Sometimes business owners don't want to have to be
Mhm.
accountable to a budget, or they think it's putting them in a prison or handcuffing them to be able.
Don't put me in a
Yeah,
box.
don't put me in a box, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I don't I try not to use the word budget, but what is our plan? What are our goals? And try to put bounds around that is one of the big things that we want to do up first. That also helps us identify where are we seeing issues if we're not aligning to our spending and our profits and our ratios based on where they should be. Why is that? And that helps us identify what's the next thing we need to work on and dig into. So one of the things that or a couple things around that is as far as why the revenue is growing, the profit isn't. A lot of
Mhm.
times we have to identify, is it an operational thing or is it a financial thing? Operationally, if we're paying people hourly, there could be a lot of time that they're driving, preparing for jobs. We're paying by the hour, but we're only invoicing our customers a certain amount. And unless that efficiency is up to a certain level, we're not going to be profitable. And so that's one of the things that we see a lot where it's like, hey, we're working this many hours on the job and we're making this much revenue and it costs us this much in labor. We're not taking into account drive time and those other inefficiencies. We might not be taking into account labor burden, taxes, benefits, things like
Mhm.
that. And so how do we uplift our actual costs, what it's actually costing us per hour on the job in order to fairly compare that to what revenue we're getting for that job? So that leads to pricing jobs too low, compensating too high. Again, we can compensate based on emotion and not based on facts. And we might not be charging enough in order to get to the gross profit that we need based on
Mm.
that efficiency factored in. So pricing is a big thing that we work on. And depending on the situation, we really break it down to what is our actual price? What is the market price that we're banging up against? Can we charge more than market price because we have a strategic differentiator? Do we have to match it? Do we have to beat it? That's sort of one side of it. The other side is how much is it actually costing us to operate and what do we need to charge to be profitable? And so we have to look at all that data to figure out where do we need to land pricing wise? What does that mean for our gross profit? If it's not where we need to be, what other changes can we make? Can we reduce drive time and improve our route planning? Can we save something on materials because that's another direct cost that we're hit with. What are
Yeah.
those things that we can do to improve that? But it really, pricing is a big lever as it comes to being profitable. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I know you're really big on cash flow,
Yep.
so much you're put it in your company name, right? But I think a lot of people get confused with the idea of cash flow versus profit.
For sure.
Can you break down how you think about cash flow versus profit? What are the differences there? What affects another? And why understanding that, difference in those two things is really a mission critical thing.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So we start with our revenue, we subtract our direct costs, the actual cost of delivering our product or service, that's cost of goods sold, that gets us to our gross profit. Then we subtract our expenses, which are not directly tied to delivering a product or service, but they're required to operate the business. Your marketing, your administrative, your overhead, things like that. That gets us to our operating profit. Um, we can also say net income if we want to make that simple, but there's some other things like interest income and expenses and depreciation, things like that that
Sure.
aren't necessarily related to running our core business. that comes into play. But let's say, we got to net income, which is the bottom of the P&L. From there, what that doesn't take into account is owner distributions. So if we're taking money out of the company for owner distributions, that is not a P&L item, but that it does come out of cash. Depreciation does show up on the P&L, but that's a non-cash item. So we actually have to add back depreciation to say, or amortization to say, that didn't actually cost us any cash. That's just a tax play that we use to reduce our taxes, but it's not a cash item. So we actually have to add that back. Another thing we have to take out is when we make payments on loans, only the interest portion is showing up on our P&L as an expense, but the principal portion, which is the rest of the payment, is not. And that's another thing that physically comes out of our bank account. If we're making $1,000 loan payment, $200 is interest. That shows up as an expense. The other $800 doesn't show up on our P&L, but we have to factor that in because $1,000 came out of our bank account, right? When you buy equipment, if it's large enough to put on the balance sheet, you buy a $2,500 piece of equipment. Technically, that needs to be capitalized, so that won't come off as an expense. Not to dive too deep, your CPA could depreciate it that year, things like that. But if you pay cash for a vehicle, large equipment, things like that, those are going to come out of cash, not going to show up as an expense on the P&L. So we have to look at all those things. Same with timing of other debt payments that are more short-term, like credit cards. So think of it as, you spend money on your credit card throughout the month, and you see all these expenses lining up on your P&L, but you haven't physically paid that credit card off yet. You might not do that till next month. So we actually have to, when that credit card is paid down, that's when the cash comes out of the bank. That timing is different than what shows up on the P&L. So we have to take that into account. When is that going to happen, right? So those are all items that affect cash that are not represented on the income statement or the P&L.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk about margins and pricing, which you talked about pricing a little bit
Yeah.
earlier. But cleaning companies at times, when they're starting off, margins might be great because it's one or two people, right? But as you grow, a lot of people slip into like really thin margins, as well as when you're trying to scale, margins can be something that takes a big hit. What are some of the most common pricing mistakes that you see, and what are ways to fix it? Because there's really, I hear it all the time in this world. Like there's debate, like what should you charge? And we had somebody on recently, and they're like, quit asking just Facebook industry groups what you should charge. Not your price does not have to be what somebody else's price is. Everybody has different costs. Everybody has different markets and things like that.
Yep.
So how should we price services in this industry to make sure our margins are always going to be healthy?
Yep. Yeah, great question. So number one, we do have a labor calculator that we created, and we'll actually do it as a giveaway as well. But
Sure.
how do we factor in those inefficiencies? So we need to understand our internal costs. We need to understand the inefficiencies of drive time. We need to understand the impact of taxes and other burden on labor. And we need to understand what gross profit we're trying to achieve. So again, internally, we can come up with, if we charge X dollars per on the job hour, or per invoice hour, this will get us back to the margin that we need to be at. Like you mentioned, this is, assuming you can do it at any time, but assuming you have staff and you have a pretty predictable labor rate, and everybody's paid pretty similarly, or you can take an average of it, whatever. But as long as you have a pretty stable labor rate and pretty stable pricing, you can figure out, okay, here's what I need to charge to get to a certain, rate.
Sure.
Then you obviously can look at competition. You can look at the market, and then you can figure out, how do I compare to that market? Can I charge a premium? Can I not? But you have to do the external work and the internal work and compare them to each other to figure out, where do I need to be? Secondly, you can be strategic and offer bundles. So you can, hey, we'll do this, and we'll tack on this other thing since we're going to be there for $50 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Other items that could bring a lot more profit since you're already there, than if you went out and did them separately. And then you can discount them under the covers and say, hey, these two separately are $200, but we're going to discount it if you do both for $175. your gross profit dollars actually grow. You're already there. So you can be strategic there to upsell and to bundle
Mm.
to get higher total gross profit dollars. Your margin may or may not, your margin percent may go down a little bit, but you're getting
Sure.
additional gross profit dollars that go right to the bottom line because we've already covered all of our fixed expenses, things like that. So bundling is a big thing. Providing options, saying, hey, here's, good, better, best is always, recommended in any industry to say, here, I'm going to give you some options as opposed to just saying it's X amount of dollars and that's it. Well, if you don't give them an option to compare yourself against yourself, they're going to compare you to someone external. You're really giving them
Mhm.
ultimatum, right? Where it's yes or no with me, and if I want a comparative price, I have to call these other two companies to get some price comparisons. But if you give them options right there, they feel like they don't need to, psychologically go out and get prices elsewhere. So that is that's another big thing as far as positioning your pricing.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And you talked about a few of these earlier, but there's also just certain cost categories
Yeah.
that can really sneak up and kill profit. I know in other episodes for this season, we've talked about those subscriptions
Mm.
that are very easy to sign up for,
Yep.
to make sure like those, tech stack and like your subscriptions through technology, make sure you're watching out for those. I think you mentioned like just supplies
Yep.
in like the cleaning world. So like your chemicals, your cleaning supplies, even gas in the cars, like that kind of thing. What are some cost categories that can be sneaky that people might not be thinking about, but you also see like really sneak up on people and can kill the margins?
Yeah, for sure. Subscriptions and software is a big one there. That's kind of the death by a thousand cuts, but it's, it can get sneaky when you're testing different softwares and you think, oh, I need Loom and I need ChatGPT and I need all these things and a CRM and I've got, this, that, and the other thing. A lot of times it's, how are these actually contributing to the business? Is there a way to consolidate or cancel any of these? That's an easy win to go through those every, 3 to 6 months and figure that out. Um, Assuming, if you haven't optimized your workers' comp or your liability insurance, again,
Mm.
every 6 months or so, definitely review that, see if you can get a better deal. I would say generally the companies that are getting into trouble, their direct labor is really high. It's, in the 60% range where it's just out of control. And that can be, again, when you break it down, is it an operational thing? Where we're not route planning efficiently? Is it a
Mhm.
pricing thing that we're pricing too low? Because if we price higher and nothing else changes, our COGS labor, our direct labor percent is going to go down just by virtue of charging more. Or are we paying people too much? And that can be for administrative labor or for direct labor. That can be due to several different things. Again, it could be operational, could be, hey, we think we need this many people, but we don't need this many people. If you really break down who's actually doing what, or from a business standpoint, what actual things need to be done, how many FTEs or how many headcount do we need to actually do this work, and what work can be combined with other work, and let's track that and make sure that there's no fat in that process or the no inefficiencies in that process. And then say, do we actually have that many people, or are we overstaffing because we think, oh, I need a person for AR and I need a person for
Mm.
scheduling and dispatching, and then I need another person for this, and pretty soon you got 4 or 5 salaries, and it's like, well, really, you only need 2 or 3,
Yeah.
because you can combine a lot of this stuff. Again, it could be either people just sloughing off, not working fast, or it could be, hey, we have 2 people touching the same process. We should only have one person touching the process, or maybe we don't even need this as part of the process. Can we cut out steps to that process? Can we have a software that automates some of what they're doing? Um, so direct labor specifically, a lot of the times is again 60%. We want to see it more around 40 to 45%. So is that a pricing issue? Is it a compensation issue? Is it an operational efficiency issue? And so we can dig into that and figure out how to squeeze that down. Admin labor is another big one that can really creep up. And we've
Mhm.
seen a lot of where it's again, we're paying too much just for this overhead, for this administrative overhead, because we think we need it, or we think businesses of our stature. And I've been victim to that myself sometimes, where it's like, oh, I'd like to have this help and this help and this help. And it's like, I don't really need that, yet. Let's wait till the business really needs it. Don't do it so we can feel special or we can feel like we're a bigger business just because we hire more employees. Really, does it need it? Because that can really drag it down. And then the third thing is really discretionary spending. So we'll see people that are very um, optimistic about where they're going to be a year or two from now, and they'll do, hey, employee engagement parties, and we'll do, lots of meals and entertainment. We'll do things like this because, yeah, we're growing this big thing. We got to, we're doing 10 million in revenue. We should be able to spend
Mhm.
all this money, but they don't realize, hey, you're really, impacting your bottom line. And again, if you don't have a budget, you're holding yourself accountable to say, hey, you should only spend this much for discretionary stuff. That can get out of hand pretty quick as well.
That second point you were talking about where maybe our egos get involved,
Yeah.
right? Where we think we need multiple people because it would be nice to have this. And it's like sometimes we get out in front of ourselves.
Yeah.
Where is the line? And this is not a question on my notes. This was just from the conversation. Like, where is the line of following that who, not how principle that you referenced earlier, but also doing it responsibly?
Yeah.
Like, how do we who, not how responsibly? And how do we know when we're able to bring on a who to take over something that we don't want to do anymore? Or it would be nice to have someone to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's different when we're talking about positions that are doing like direct service, like cleaning technicians and things like that. That's easier to justify because we can know I'm paying this much per hour for them to do that job. And I know I'm getting paid this much per hour. Like that math is easier to justify and understand.
Yeah.
But for those office positions or those admin positions, talk me through like where should people's brains be on starting to justify that type of help? And when does that who, not how be like, what is that line between who, not howing responsibly?
Yeah.
you know?
I like it. Yeah, that's great. Um, it's not always a distinctly clear line. It can be very unique to different businesses, and a lot of it is mental and emotional, and some of it's financial, and again, projecting where we're going, and we may or may not get to that point. So I would say, first we want to understand what does the company need to handle from a task perspective or a process perspective, right? So let's write the processes down. Let's understand that. Let's try to optimize the processes to reduce the total number of hours that need to be done for these processes. If we can cut out steps, great. If we can cut out number of people that have to touch the same thing, great. Let's streamline this. Let's make sure there are checks and balances. We want to make sure that there are checks and balances in the company, especially when it relates to financial things. We want to have, oversight and things like that. But let's try to define what the company needs, as opposed to what I see a lot is we already have, um, you know, Joe and Kim and Jeff on staff, and we want to make sure that we employ them. So let's figure out what we can give them to do. So that makes it more emotional. No, we have to start with what does the company need process wise? What is the best way to staff that based on those processes? And then what kind of skill levels do we need? What kind of people do we need? How much would we need to pay them? And let's make sure that package fits into how much we should be spending percentage wise in our company before we even talk about who are we going to have to fill those positions. And it is more challenging when you already have people on staff. And another thing is, I've seen a lot of is we are staffing for a company that's bigger than where we're at. We have, we have these 5 administrative people right now. We only need 3, but we're expecting to do an extra $500,000 or $1 million of business this year. And
Mm.
we get to the end of the year and we were flat, or we were only up, 10% from last year. So now we carried, an extra 1 or 2 people for that full year, and the revenue, the business didn't come like we thought it would, right? So it's really challenging that perspective to say, yeah, we don't want to wait until it's too late to make these hires, but we also don't want to carry all these salaries or these hourly wages for months or years when the business that justified them being on board has not materialized yet. So we have to be a little bit more agile to time that a little bit better. And another thing is just having the owner really be in tune with Are you able to do this? You may not like to do this, but you still have the bandwidth to do this, again, based on where the
Mhm.
company is at. So, Mr. Mrs. Owner, you're getting paid a salary. Ideally, we're set up as an S corp, which we can talk about as well, but you should be getting a reasonable salary, and maybe you don't have maybe you have bandwidth in your schedule to be able to handle some of these tasks, even though it feels beneath you at this point in time, but it's going to save the company, ten or $20,000. So maybe we have you do this for a little bit of time until we get to the point where we're growing and you need to be focusing elsewhere. So that can really be again, breaking down the ego to say, can you handle this for now, for the next 6 months or a year, assuming that we don't grow to where we need to be? If we do, then great, we'll hire someone to do that because now it justifies it. But we need to stay within that box of we only want to spend so much for administrative help because that's just really a drag on the bottom line to the company. Um, so those are some ways. And then again, measuring those. So okay, here's what we set up. Now let's measure that. Let's measure these processes. Let's measure how much time it's taking. Let's have our weekly meetings to discuss process issues and what's taking longer than we thought and where can we improve, and getting the feedback from the people that are sitting in those positions to really improve those things as well as we go.
So unfortunately, the answer is patience.
Yes.
Probably.
That's a lot.
Got it.
Yes.
That's something we're all really great at, so that's good to hear. Let's move on to just the idea of like financial systems and rhythms inside of a company.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about really this season. Who I had in mind was for those people that call themselves not a numbers person,
Yeah.
right? And we talked about them a little earlier, where they kind of like fell into this idea of owning a business. Then I forget who it was. But another episode, we just people that think, oh, I wasn't good at math in high school. How in the world can I become the person that is in charge of the financials for my company? Right. Like that's who we're talking about here.
Yeah.
What are the minimum like financial habits that every cleaning business owner should be practicing, even if they're not labeling themselves as a numbers person? Like, what are like bare minimum? What should they be doing to get started?
Yeah. So, right from the beginning, and we've seen this sometime, is not clearly separating business from personal financials. So,
Mhm.
not only is that good financial hygiene, but it also can lead to liability issues. If you are an LLC, but you're not separating your business, financials from personal, they
Yeah.
can technically, pierce the veil. You can get sued individually because they can say you're not operating this as a separate company. So minimum, separate your business and personal bank accounts, like everything, all of your spending. Really get that clean. And then secondly, get yourself set up as an S corp. Once you get, again, there's no magic number, but typically when you're getting net profit that decently exceeds what your reasonable salary as the owner should be in that company, there's a little bit more cost and processes involved in managing it as an S corp, tax returns and payroll and things like that. But let's say your reasonable salary is $50,000. Once you get up into that $60,000 to $80,000 in net profit, think about switching to an S corp. If you're
Mm.
still newer, that's going to save you tax dollars. And there's calculators. We have one that we built too to show you how much you'll save if you do that. But that's another thing. And then within your business accounts, I like the profit first mentality. I don't typically recommend having, 7 different bank accounts, but I do recommend, have sort of an operations bank account, have one for savings for the business that you're putting a certain percentage away in for future growth. Um, and then have one for taxes, which could be combined with savings if you can track all that, and keep it separate. And then one for owner profit, just to understand, hey, this is what we're ideally going to take for distributions, even if distributions at the beginning are only to pay our quarterly taxes. So, we don't have a huge tax bill at the end of the year. It may not be
Yeah.
enough to take additional compensation from that, but we want to have that hygiene of, okay, we're paying our quarterly taxes. We're going to get in this habit. That's also good if you, again, ever get into legal trouble or things like that, they can look back and say, if you all of a sudden took a bunch of money out of the business, well, you haven't been doing that historically, so that seems sketchy, right? So take those quarterly distributions, and really be methodical and set aside. money into those different buckets every month or every week as things settle. So the biggest things, it's all about what you do on a daily and weekly basis. It's not the big things that you do. It's, just like with anything in life, it's all the habits, and it's a accumulation of all the small habits that you do. So making sure all those things are separated out. Um, and then, really setting up a basic scorecard. So I would
Mm,
say, financially, from a weekly standpoint, I would say, what is our revenue? What is our AR, and what is our net cash flow, is kind of the big three that I like to look at to say, how are we trending? And these things all point to cash. If AR is growing faster than revenue, that's a red flag. If revenue is growing and AR is staying stable or decreasing and our cash is not flowing in, why is that? So really tracking those things and understanding those. From a If we want to expand that a little bit, and typically the buckets we look at from a bookkeeping perspective, or that we can look at monthly, is your COGS categories, labor and materials, and then your expense buckets, marketing, admin, fixed, variable, or discretionary, and net income. Looking at those things on a monthly basis, that's a good way to break it down. And then, from a customer or marketing standpoint, the KPIs we like to look at are, um, as far as new customers, one-time cleanings, recurring cleanings, how many customers are we losing? Um, and then, some things around marketing as well, as far as, conversions and things like that, which, you're obviously very familiar with. So
sure.
establishing, a simple scorecard and actually using it. And I don't I will say having a simple scorecard is better than not having a scorecard at all. And there's really no right or wrong answer.
Mm,
Just kind of building it out to say, okay, is this helpful to look at? Is this not? And getting some advice on that. But just try to keep it to, 3 to 5 metrics, and actually putting the numbers in there and actually tracking that. Because one thing is important is looking at trends, and it's not just looking at where we're at now or where we've been, but looking at what are the trends that are happening, because that's really what highlights a lot of the issues, right? One of the things that we like to focus on is forecasting, and so bookkeeping is great. It's the foundation, but it's very backward looking, and if all we're
mm,
doing is looking backwards, we can't solve problems, in the future until we've passed that point. So if we're doing a forecast now through the end of the year, or into next year, and we see issues, we can actually make decisions now to impact those, right? Versus if we're just looking backwards, it's not going to be until December next year that we're like, oh, there was a problem, but now it's too late to fix it because the damage is done. So, forecasting, I would say, is a little bit more challenging for someone to do on
sure.
their own, but a 13-week cash flow forecast is super impactful, and that can be relatively easy to do as well.
Love it.
Yeah.
Let's say they have 30 minutes a week
Yep.
that they can like fully dedicate to like their finances and their business.
Yep.
What should it be entailed in that 30 minutes?
Yeah, so grabbing their, QuickBooks data or whatever it is, plugging it into a scorecard. You can just create one on Google Sheets. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or a paid software for that. EOS, if you're running that, I know you guys are. If you have that framework, uh, whatever software you use, typically that will, I mean, it does provide a scorecard,
Yeah.
and you can customize that. So making sure, and you don't even need to do it yourself, but just someone ahead of time puts that in, and then we spend time, whether it's in an EOS meeting or a separate meeting with the leadership team, going over those financial metrics that I talked about is one of the biggest things you can do. And then leaving yourself a little time to highlight, okay, maybe pick one thing every week to look at the, more historical trends on it, to say, like, is this healthy or is this not? And if it's getting worse, why is that? And then spending, a half hour to an hour digging into that one thing to figure out, why is that? Just ask the question, why is that? Why is this happening? Why is this getting better? Why is this getting worse? And just really understanding that, because that'll help you uncover issues that may be silently draining your profits, right?
Mm,
Or your productivity. So biggest thing is, yeah, get the numbers in there, review them, and hold yourself and your team accountable to them. You can even compensate around those things eventually.
Sure.
Discuss them, look at the trends, and then again, pick sort of one at a time and dig into which one's the biggest issue. Why is it happening? What can we do to fix it? And then spend your time around taking action to actually improve it, as opposed to just saying, well, that looks terrible and good to know. We'll see how it turns out next week. You know what I mean? And so it's no, you got to understand why it's happening, because the numbers are just the numbers. They're not gonna,
Mm.
they're not gonna, unless they're set up perfect, they're not gonna tell you exactly why they're getting worse or
Yeah.
better. You have to do that work to understand them.
So it makes sense. So let's talk about being financially responsible through growth. And lately I've been really just thinking growth is chaos, scaling is controlled chaos, because no matter how well everything is set up, running a business is always a little bit of chaos.
Yeah.
So it can just be more controlled chaos than others.
Yes.
But growth feels exciting at times. You feel like, oh my gosh, we're doing it. You're right. We're on that roller coaster, we're going up.
Yep.
But it's also financially, it can create chaos. Growth can. Not all things that come with growth are great. How can owners scale or grow responsibly without getting upside down, without being cash poor?
Yep.
What are some things that can help them with that?
Yeah, for sure. And the biggest thing, the first step is to understand, are you profitable? Are you scalable as your current business sits, right? And so if we're struggling with margins now, to your earlier point you made, where you might be scaling, you might be doubling your revenue, but if you're losing money right now, you're just going to double the rate at which you lose the money, right? So,
Yeah.
you're only going to replicate what you're currently doing, and so cleaning yourself up, cleaning your business up first, and making it profitable is the first step. And so, a lot of times, pricing is done because we feel like we need to meet the competition or beat the competition, or we just feel bad because we screwed something up for this customer, or maybe we got some bad reviews or whatever it is. We price a lot out of fear, and a lot of times instead of confidence, and a lot of times it undercuts where we're at. So making sure that we have a scalable business to begin with is a big thing. Second thing is, maybe instead of taking on a bunch of new customers, which involves potentially hiring people, buying another vehicle or equipment, doing the training, all of which costs money before we actually get revenue out of it. Maybe instead of that, we think about uplifting our pricing to our existing customers with our current staff. Maybe we lose a few, but maybe we're going to make the exact same revenue and profit at the end of the day with fewer customers and the same cleaning specs, instead of taking on new business. So maybe we need to right size that first, get us in a better position. And then if we grow at those new rates, great. If we don't, we now just became more profitable without changing anything. So that's understanding where we're at. Are we scalable? And then if we do get to the point where we're like, no, we think we can scale this thing, again, it's understanding that cash flow dance and timing. What is this going to actually cost us to grow? What is crucial to get right away versus maybe that's a nice to have and we can get later, but really factoring in all of our costs, and when is the actual customers going to start, doing work with us? When are they actually going to pay us? How long is our AR, our cash conversion cycle? But really understanding the timing on that. So again, it might look good on a P&L, on a forecast on paper, but what is the timing of all those cash flows, all those investments, all those maybe new inefficiencies because we have to hire new people, we have to pay for recruiting, we have to do training. How much is that going to take in terms of time and expense? What do they need for, again, vehicles, equipment, things like that? So really understanding all of that timing is a huge, huge deal. And then also figuring out, okay, how is this going to change any of our expense percentages, our margins, anything like that? And so that, brings us full circle back to the forecasting as well, is how do we run this scenario and say, okay, if we did nothing, here's where what we'd look like. If we did grow, here's all the pluses, but also here's all the minuses, financially, as far as cash and profit go, and really mapping that out and making sure, based on the timeline, it's accurate to the best of our knowledge and what that's really going to entail. And then that helps you figure out, is it doable, is it not? And it really presses you to understand what are the crucial first steps that we need versus what are the nice to haves. And then let's try to
Mm.
manipulate it in a way that it works based on, timing.
One of my favorite books is a book called 10x is easier than 2x. And there's a line that will always ring true to me. And it's what got you to where you are is not what's going to get you to where you're going.
Yep.
And listening to you, talk, it's like there's a similar comparison to this.
Mhm.
What got you to get, or what will make you scale, is not just more of what got you to the point where you're ready to scale.
Yep.
It can be a whole different thing,
Yes.
right? You won't scale by just doing more of what got you to grow.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And for a lot of home services companies, that can involve hiring new uh, job descriptions, new roles that didn't exist before, right? When you have two, power washing technicians, it's like, well, I can manage them myself. But when you have 20, you need an operations manager, or you need and leads.
Yeah.
You need to decide if you're running one or two man crews. That comes into play with how many vehicles do we need? How does that impact all of that, right? And you might need new software, right? A lot of companies outgrow their software. A lot of them now need to track. Okay, I need more detailed tracking in terms of people checking in or out of jobs, GPS tracking, time tracking, things like that, so we can get a better handle on, when two technicians leak a half hour a day because they're stopping at gas station and things like that. Maybe not a big deal, but when we have 20 technicians doing that, it can be
That's up.
tens of thousands of dollars, right? And so
Yeah.
so maybe we need to invest a little bit more in a software that tracks that better, things like that. So it definitely, and processes need to change, right? Because the bigger you grow, the more variables you're going to have to deal with. Do we need to expand a
Yeah.
new location? That can be super costly. That's a whole different animal. But how do we make it work and still not end up in a worse spot than we are now? Because growing is painful and it's a lot of work. It can be, but so we want to end up in a better financial position than where we're at now. Otherwise, why do it, right? So
Sure.
it's definitely, yeah, figuring out what are all those new things, how much is it going to cost us, and how is life going to look, and how is that going to be different, and that can help guide a lot of those decisions. But it's very true, that quote.
Love that. Very cool. Hey, I want to end on this. We've been doing this lately on episodes, and I'm calling it like the elevator speech.
Yeah.
You've got 60 seconds to talk to a cleaning business owner who is working hard. They feel like they're doing the right things. They're seeing the growth,
Hmm.
but they're still not seeing that profit grow.
Yeah.
What do you tell them? You've got 60 seconds with them in an elevator. How do you change their world?
Yeah, well, I say you're not alone, and the biggest thing is we need to create awareness. We need to create structures, and we need to identify what are the drivers as far as why you're not being profitable. So we need to turn that financial stress into strategic clarity. How do we take not only what happened in the past and what's happening in the present, but also what we see happening in the future? How do we make that into a simple story to explain that story that the numbers are trying to tell you, so that you can write the ending to that story, right? You don't have to be a slave to what's already happened in your business. You have the ability to change things, and we have the ability to figure out what those actual problems are so that you can take action on those. And you don't need to feel overwhelmed or feel like the numbers are driving you. You can hit these things head on. You can take control of your numbers. We don't have to use confusing financial jargon. We can lay it out simply. We can identify those, and we can really put you back in the driver's seat so you can lead your company and your team with confidence and not confusion and overwhelm. We can, bring calm to that storm. So you're
Well,
you're not alone, and it happens to everybody. And there's people that can help, there's tools that can help, and there's solutions, and there's always a way out the other side. So yeah, don't give up, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
I love it. Hey, Justin, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today. It was really cool, as I was hoping would be, to hear your viewpoint from where you sit in your seat all day, every day, dealing with home service businesses and cleaning companies on helping them get that clarity. It was Very nice talking to you today.
Yeah.
Thank you for breaking down what can feel honestly like just a really overwhelming part of
Yeah.
business, breaking it down into clear, actionable insights. So I appreciate it. Where's the best place for our listeners to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing at Cashflow Copilot?
Yeah, for sure. So our website is yourcashflowcopilot.com. And then we're on Instagram. I believe it's cashflow.copilot. And I'm on, LinkedIn. We're on TikTok. We're just starting a YouTube channel. But yeah, and we're starting an education platform. Hopefully, will be out in the next several months. But yeah, come visit our website. We are going to have a landing page for that. Uh, Labor calculator, like I mentioned, and that's a
Very
really
cool.
good tool to figure out what is my true cost of labor and what should I be charging my customers. But yeah, feel free to
Love a
visit.
calculator.
Yeah, yeah,
Love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Very cool. Well, hey, if you found this episode helpful, share it with a cleaning business owner that you know. I mean, there's definitely a stigma around the conversation of business financials, and
yes.
sometimes we get hush hush about it. But if I've learned one thing about this cleaning industry is that it's one of the most tight knit business communities that I've ever seen. Share this with one, two, three, four, five of your friends that you know in the industry that would get value from the knowledge that Justin dropped today. Because at the end of the day, we do know the numbers tell the story, and getting control of them is one of the most freeing feelings that you can do as an owner. So it just takes that first step to get that story going. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.